Hey there, this is Christina from Pixiedrops, and today we're going to be working on this lilac and reclaimed palette wood digital backdrop, and I'm going to be showing you a few of my tips and tricks and show you how I make seamless composites every time as much as I can. I wouldn't say they're perfect every time, but I strive to make them as perfect as I possibly can. So, first things first, when it comes to compositing, you want to check for the direction of light in the backdrop. And if you're purchasing Pixiedrops, it's a pretty safe bet that the light is coming from the top and the left, because that tends to be my habit. I know everybody kind of has a way that they like to shoot, and that just seems to be the way that I always do it. The light's always over here and flagged about 45 degrees, so I get a nice shadow. And so when I'm shooting for this, I want to make sure that I'm matching the lighting, or if I haven't shot for it, I'm going to look through my catalog or my backlog of images of newborns, and I'm going to make sure I have one that has the same or very similar lighting. And so that's what's happened here. As you can see, the light is coming from the top and the left, and so we're seeing the shadowing drop down here. Also, I like to shoot, if I'm going to shoot for a digital, I like to shoot with a similar colored, similar textured piece of fabric or wool or fur, so that I can blend it in here. Because what I'm going to do, my little cheat, is I like to use part of the backdrop that she's on, so that I have those believable shadows. Shadows are some of the big giveaways when it comes to doing composites, and you want to make sure that your shadows match, and no one will ever know that she wasn't actually in this scene. So let's get started. I do see one thing that might trip us up here, and that's it's a little bit darker here than it is in the image that I shot, and that's no big deal. We can actually take care of that with no problem. I'm actually going to start there, and I'm going to duplicate this layer, and then I'm going to hold the Alt key and hit the layer mask, and that hides the layer mask, and then I'm going to go to multiply. I'm going to come on over to my brush tool, and I have my brush down opacity and flow 35 and 29. They're not always exact numbers. I just like to keep them both down so that I can build. And I'm just going to darken this right now because I know that the scene is darker than this image. And this is just going to make my life easier when it goes time to composite here. So we're going to darken this down, darken her shadow behind her down. That landing shadow in the back is always a dead giveaway. So let's just turn our brush down. That's the left bracket key, the hotkey shortcut there. Save your life. So that's going to be enough for now. If I have to darken it more, I'll do so when I get her in the backdrop. So I'm just going to flatten that. And now what I'm going to do, because she has this amazing hair, I'm going to go ahead and use the quick select here. And I'm going to select around her hair and around her, but I'm not really interested in having a perfect cutout on her because I do want to use some of this fur layer for my blending. But one thing that I can't do by hand is this amazing hair, so I'm going to use this quick selection for that. I'm going to hit the Alt key and deselect there. And one more time. Took away too much. I probably have my brush up a bit high, so we're just going to add that back. And again, I'm not going to worry about this too much because I do want some of that fur layer. So we're going to go ahead, select and mask. And then I'm going to refine this when my computer catches up. This tends to be a big slowdown on your computer, but it's well worth it just to get this hair. So I'm going to run my brush along the edge of her hair to exclude the tan color behind her and leave those amazing curls. And I'm only worrying about the hair with this selection. I'm not going to select all around her because, again, I'm going to use some of this fur. And so I'm going to export or output it to a new layer with layer mask. And when my computer catches up here, I'm going to click OK. As you can see, we've picked up the hair and we've left behind that cream tone. And that's really going to give a believable look when we get her into the backdrop, because those stray hairs are a dead giveaway. If you remove them, it can really look like a composite. Okay, so it looks like Photoshop did a pretty good job there. So I'm just going to grab this new layer and I'm going to pick it up with my arrow tool, or selection tool, and drop it on in here. And obviously she's quite a bit too big, so that's Control T, and then grab the corner to maintain the aspect ratio as you are resizing. And I want her to fill up most of this bed so that she's the focal point. Let's see, we have a natural area here that fits from her pose to the backdrop. Maybe a little smaller. Okay, and we're going to click the arrow key. I'm glad this has shown up. When you use the quick selection tool, there always is this sort of ghosting with the box of the original image, and I have missed it on many an occasion, so I'm going to get rid of it right now. I'm going to come over to the layer mask, flip over to the black to remove it, and come right up to 100% on my brush and follow around to make sure I get rid of that. Feel awfully silly when you get done in composite and export it, and then lo and behold, you've still got that square. She's quite a bit too bright here, and that's okay. We can work with that too. So I'm going to actually go click on her layer, and we're going to go to Filter and Camera Raw Filter. And I'm going to go ahead and just turn her exposure down by quite a bit. And that's pretty close to what I'm wanting. Selection tool didn't do the most amazing job on her hair, so we're going to have to do it ourselves. I'm going to come back over to her layer and grab that black brush. I'm not going to have it 100%. I'm going to have it at about 73 on both. And a little bit bigger brush so that you can just tap, tap, tap in and remove. I'm just gently tapping so that it's not taking everything away. And get rid of that haloing, because that does not look very good. Turn my brush down a little bit here. I'm not going to worry about losing part of her headband because I'm going to show you in a little bit what I'm going to do there. Okay, so we don't have a very nice cut at the back here, so I'm going to come in. Again, I don't leave my brush at 100% here because I like to work my way in. And I've gone too far there, so I'm just going to hit the X key to paint it back. X key to go back to black, and I'm going to just work on blending here. And the beauty of using layer masks, if you go too far, you just switch over and paint it back. You can always go into your history palette and go back in time in your history if you like, but with layer masks you have a lot of freedom to work. A little bit too far again, so just going to paint that back. And again, I don't keep my brush at 100% because then I can build up what I'm looking for. So just back and forth a few times, and then you're going to get, you're going to have a bit more control over what you're doing. Okay, I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do now to zoom out, and I'm actually going to put back quite a bit of this fur layer. So I'm head on over to the layer, the adjustment layer, or not the adjustment layer, the layer mask, and I'm going to add it back at 100% so we can see what we're working with here. We want those shadows from the original image. So it looks like I've gone too far here, and that's okay because we are going to remove it. So I know I don't need this big chunk. I'm just going to take that out of there right now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn my brush down. I have a nice soft brush, and I'm going to turn it down to about 35% again. Same here, opacity and flow, so I can build. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to start removing from the outside in her fur layer. And I'm just tapping my way in there so that I can get that blend from her fur to the fur that I've provided in the backdrop. And again, that way we're maintaining some of the texture of the fur that she was on, and we're also maintaining those shadows right there, and we don't have to create shadows. They already exist in the original image. So that's where the pre-planning really helps when you're shooting for, or when you're doing a composite. If you do a tiny bit of pre-planning, your life is going to be so much easier. So I'm just going to work my way around here. Just edging my way in to get closer to her. But I do want to leave some of that texture from the layer she was on. Just turning my brush down, get a little finer detail. And one of the main things about doing compositing, it can be a bit tedious, but it's those small details that really give you away. If you don't take the time for the small details, it's really obvious that you've done a composite, and primarily that's going to be shadowing. So when you cheat, well, not cheat, it's a bit of just a little tip to use her original shadows. There are ways to add shadows if you haven't shot for backdrop. I'm not going to go over that in this tutorial though. And I'm going to remove most of her layer on the edge here so that it's not really obvious that we've added her in here, and just fine tune around her. Turn my the brush right down, come back in here. Okay, let's zoom out. So we're going to hit the magnifying glass, and that's looking pretty amazing. I think what I might do here, I might move her up a little bit. And then I'm going to turn her a little bit. So that's just Control T, and then you grab the corner to rotate. Right, okay, back to her layer. I can see a little bit of haloing here, so we need to remove that. And we'll do that. I took off a bit too much of her headband, so we'll just add that back. So I'm just going to run along the edge here with that soft white brush and make sure that we do have as much of her shadows as we can get. But I'm really happy with that. And I think what I'll do also, because when I shoot this, obviously it's empty, and there would be a shadow here if you had a subject in when you were creating this. So what I'm going to do is just come into the background layer, and I'm going to just come into the burn and just burn onto the background layer a little bit of a shadow there. And here's the before, and there's the after. You definitely would have a shadow falling. And I'm going to come onto her layer, and I'm just going to tap in a bit more shadowing on her foot. Okay. And I'm going to just run along here and remove some of that because it's a bit too bright. So back to my layer mask and back to the black brush, and I'm going to turn it right down and just remove some of that bright fur. You can also change the color of the fur so that it matches the fur in the background. And that's not so hard to do. I'm just going to show you really quickly. Let's come back here. I'll remove this layer. And if you want to change the color, what you can do is select this color. Make sure you're on the background layer. Select this color. Come on over here. This is before you cut it all out. Add a new layer and paint it over, and then we're going to hit Alt and the layer mask, and then I'm going to come into color here, and then we're going to paint it on. Turn up the brush, and I don't have it at, I'm going to put it at 100%. So then you're going to change this color. This doesn't always work. Photoshop. Oh. That sometimes works better than other times. And you can always just play around with it. You can also, let's flatten that, and then you can duplicate another layer mask. I'll hold the Alt key, and then you can go into multiply and go ahead and paint that on to darken it up. See, that's a bit too dark, but it's better than what it was there, so I'm just doing it really quick to show you. But if you don't like how dark that is, then you just come into the opacity and turn it down, and then this is going to more closely match what we were doing over here. Okay. So now I'm going to add an adjustment layer to her, and I'm going to go ahead and just create a levels layer, and then I'm going to bring down her shadows, but I want to make sure and clip the adjustment to her. Bring the shadows down, and then midtones up and highlights up a little bit. We don't want to get too carried away. And then you can also add a curves layer here. Pull the shadows down again. And make sure it's clipped to her so that you're not affecting the entire scene. That's too far. So we're just going to come back up a bit. Alright, and I'm just going to quickly burn in on her layer right around her back end. Just it's a little bit bright. Just the tiniest amount. So to show you the before and after here. Tiniest amount. So the final thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add lilacs to her headband. And the way that I do that is I come into her layer and then I'm going to hit the clone stamp and make sure that it's on current and below. Then I'm going to come in here with a small brush at 100% and I'm going to choose some lilacs from this scene that are in pretty good focus because obviously she's focused here. And then I'm just going to paint on where her existing headband is. And select again so we get a different part of flowers. I like to use those little ones that aren't open yet for the headband. And you can play around whatever you like to do. Add a full flower in there if you like. It's going to be up to you. These are fun to play with. See what you can get. And I'm just going to add some darker back here. And the final thing that I'm going to do here is change the color of this headband. And I can see I still need to remove part of this. So I'm going to come back to the layer mask and the black brush. And I'm just going to turn my brush down quite a ways. Whoops. All the way down. Okay. Because that was looking a little fuzzy on the edge there. Okay, we're going to change the color of her headband so that she better matches this scene. So the way that we're going to do that is I'm going to add a layer. I don't need a clipping mask on this layer. Going to select a purple from in here. Maybe a bit of a lighter one. And then I'm going to fill. And then add the layer mask, hold the Alt key to hide. Select color over here in the layers palette. And then I'm not going to paint this on at 100%. It's going to come down a ways there. And then I'm going to start painting on her headband to change the color. And the beauty of doing this as a layer mask is if you think that you've gone too far, or if it's just too bright, you can always turn down the opacity. Which I do think it's a little bit much, so I'm just going to turn the opacity down a little bit. All right, let's zoom out to see how we've done. I'm really happy with this. I think the only thing that I would change, let's just see if we can change that. I might change this color. I know I said I was happy with it, but I'd like a bit more contrast. Let's lighten it up a bit. And we'll just paint it in there or change it up. I think I like that. I can see where I missed when I was painting, so I'll come back to the layer mask. Turn my brush down. Paint over that pink. And again, it doesn't have to stay at 100%. We can just turn it down a tiny bit. I like that. It's very subtle. So we'll see before changing the color and after. That just works so much better with this scene. And we've lost our clipping masks, so I'm going to bring this back down here and clip them back to her. And one final adjustment, we're going to adjust the entire scene, so I'm going to do one more adjustment layer. Come into the curves, pull up the highlights, pull down the shadows a bit for that nice contrast, not too far. And voila, we have our finished product. So I thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and please feel free to contact me if you have any questions at all.